The year was 1887, and the unforgiving plains of Kansas stretched endlessly under a merciless sun. In a time when survival meant everything and kindness was a luxury few could afford, one woman's desperate hunger would lead her to an encounter that would change two families forever. What happens when society labels you a burden, but one person sees your humanity? This is a story that will remind you why sometimes the smallest acts of compassion create the biggest miracles. If stories of hope and human connection touch your heart, hit that subscribe button and join our community of storytellers. Let's dive into this incredible journey together. The dust kicked up by Martha's worn boots created small clouds that dissipated quickly in the dry Kansas air. Her stomach had been empty for 2 days now, and the gnawing pain had become a constant companion. At 32, she looked older, her face weathered by hardship, her dress patched and repatched until it barely resembled its original form. Martha had been walking since dawn, following the dirt road that connected the scattered homesteads across the prairie. Behind her lay the town of Cedar Falls, where she'd been turned away from 3 different establishments. "We don't feed drifters," the general store owner had said, his eyes cold and dismissive. "Find work if you want to eat." But work was scarce for a woman alone, especially one without references or family connections. Martha's husband had died in a mining accident 2 years prior, leaving her with nothing but debt and the clothes on her back. Since then, she'd moved from town to town, taking whatever odd jobs she could find, washing clothes, cleaning houses, helping with harvests, but it was never enough to get ahead. The sun was reaching its peak when Martha spotted a modest farmhouse in the distance. Smoke rose from the chimney, and she could see clothes hanging on a line, fluttering in the warm breeze. Her heart raced with a mixture of hope and dread. She'd approach the house, ask for work in exchange for a meal. It was her only option. As she drew closer, she noticed the property was well maintained, despite its humble appearance. The wooden fence was recently mended, the vegetable garden showed signs of careful tending, and chickens pecked contentedly in their coop. This was a working farm, which meant there might be a chance, however slim, that they needed help. Martha paused at the gate, gathering her courage. Through the window, she could see movement inside the house. Taking a deep breath, she walked up the path and knocked gently on the door. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, her graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her expression was guarded but not unkind. "Yes? Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you," Martha began, her voice hoarse from thirst. "I'm looking for work, any kind of work. I can clean, cook, help with the animals. I haven't eaten in a while, and I was hoping—" The woman's expression hardened slightly. "We don't have money for hired help. Times are tough for everyone." She started to close the door, then paused. "You look like you're about to collapse. When did you last eat?" 2 days ago, Martha admitted, swaying slightly on her feet. The woman, Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, studied Martha's face. She'd seen desperation before, but there was something in this stranger's eyes that wasn't just hunger. It was dignity fighting against circumstances beyond her control. "Wait here," Eleanor said, disappearing into the house. Martha leaned against the doorframe, grateful for even this small kindness. Through the open door, she could hear voices inside, a woman's voice and a younger male voice responding. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone seemed argumentative. Eleanor returned with a piece of bread and a cup of water. "This is all I can spare," she said, though her voice carried a note of apology. Martha accepted the offerings gratefully. "Thank you, ma'am. God bless you." As she ate the bread slowly, savoring each bite, she heard footsteps approaching from behind the house. A young man appeared around the corner, carrying a bucket of water from the well. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and kind eyes that reminded Martha of her late husband. He couldn't have been more than 25. "Ma, what's going on?" he asked, setting down the bucket. "Just a woman looking for work," Eleanor replied curtly. "I gave her some bread." The young man, Thomas Hartwell, looked at Martha with concern. He could see the exhaustion in her posture, the way she held herself as if every movement required tremendous effort. "When did you last have a proper meal?" he asked gently. Martha looked up, surprised by the genuine concern in his voice. It's been a while." Thomas glanced at his mother, then back at Martha. "Ma, look at her. She's about to fall over." "Thomas, we've discussed this. We can't feed every person who comes to our door. We barely have enough for ourselves." But Thomas was already moving toward the house. "We have leftover stew from yesterday, and there's fresh milk from this morning." "Thomas, Ma, it's the right thing to do." Martha watched this exchange with growing embarrassment. "Please, I don't want to cause trouble between you and your family." The bread was more than enough. Thomas turned to her with a smile that transformed his entire face. "Nonsense. My father always said that sharing a meal with someone in need brings blessings to the household." "Come inside." Eleanor sighed but stepped aside. 5 minutes. Then you need to be on your way." The interior of the Hartwell farmhouse was simple but clean, with handmade furniture and quilts that spoke of a family that took pride in their home despite their modest means. Martha felt overwhelmed by the warmth of the space after so many nights sleeping under the stars. Thomas ladled a generous portion of beef stew into a bowl and set it before Martha at the wooden kitchen table. The aroma made her stomach clench with anticipation. Eleanor watched from across the room, her arms crossed, but Martha noticed she'd also poured a fresh glass of milk and set out a slice of cornbread. "Thank you," Martha whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't remember the last time someone showed me such kindness." As Martha ate, Thomas sat across from her. "Where are you headed?" "Wherever I can find work," Martha replied between spoonfuls. "I heard there might be opportunities in Dodge City, but that's still 2 days' walk from here." 2 days? Thomas looked alarmed. "You can't walk that distance without proper food and rest." Eleanor spoke up from her position by the stove. "Thomas, don't get any ideas. We've done our Christian duty." But Thomas wasn't listening to his mother's warning tone. He was studying Martha's face, seeing something there that reminded him of his own struggles after his father's death 3 years ago. The farm had nearly failed that first year, and it was only through the kindness of neighbors that they'd managed to keep going. "What kind of work are you looking for?" he asked. "Anything honest," Martha replied. "I can cook, clean, mend clothes, help with animals. I worked on a farm with my husband before he died. I know how to milk cows, gather eggs, tend a garden." Thomas's eyes lit up. "Ma, you've been saying you need help with the chickens and the vegetable garden, especially with your back bothering you." Eleanor shot her son a warning look. "Thomas, and we could use help with the canning. The harvest is coming in, and you know you can't do it all yourself." Martha looked between mother and son, sensing the tension. "I don't want to impose. If you could just point me toward the main road, I'll be on my way." "Nonsense," Thomas said firmly. "It's getting late and you're in no condition to travel." "Ma, surely we can offer her a place to sleep tonight. The barn has clean hay and it's warm." Eleanor studied her son's face, recognizing the determined set of his jaw that reminded her so much of his father. When Thomas made up his mind about something, especially something he believed was right, there was no changing it. "One night," she said, finally. "But tomorrow you'll need to move on." Martha's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Thank you, both of you. I promise I won't be any trouble." As the evening progressed, Martha insisted on helping with the dinner dishes despite Eleanor's protests. As she worked, she shared stories of her travels, the people she'd met, and the small kindnesses that had kept her going. Thomas listened intently, while Eleanor found herself gradually warming to their unexpected guest. "You mentioned your husband worked on a farm," Eleanor said, as they finished cleaning up. "What happened to him?" Martha's hands stilled on the dish towel. "Mining accident in Colorado." "A cave-in. He was trying to make enough money for us to buy our own land." Her voice grew quiet. 15 men died that day. Thomas and Eleanor exchanged glances. They both knew the pain of sudden loss. Thomas's father had died when his horse threw him during a storm, breaking his neck. "I'm sorry," Eleanor said softly. "That must have been terrible." It was, but dwelling on it won't bring him back. I just have to keep moving forward one day at a time. As darkness fell, Thomas showed Martha to the barn, bringing her extra blankets and a pillow from the house. It's not much, but it's warm and dry. It's perfect, Martha assured him. I can't thank you enough for your kindness. Thomas hesitated at the barn door. Martha, can I ask you something? Of course. What keeps you going? I mean, when everything seems hopeless, what makes you get up each morning? Martha considered the question carefully. Hope, I suppose. Hope that tomorrow might be better than today, and the belief that there are still good people in the world, people like you and your mother. That night, as Martha lay in the soft hay listening to the gentle sounds of the animals, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Peace. For the first time since her husband's death, she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. In the farmhouse, Thomas and Eleanor sat by the fire, each lost in their own thoughts. She seems like a good woman, Thomas said finally. Eleanor nodded slowly. She does. But Thomas, we can't save everyone who comes to our door. I know, Ma, but maybe we're not supposed to save everyone. Maybe we're just supposed to help the ones who cross our path. Eleanor looked at her son, seeing the man he'd become since his father's death. You sound like your father. Is that a bad thing? Eleanor smiled for the first time that day. No, son, it's not a bad thing at all. Martha woke before dawn, as was her habit. The barn was still dark, but she could hear the rooster crowing in the distance and the gentle lowing of cattle. She'd slept better than she had in weeks, and for a moment she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to wake up in the same place every morning, to have a home again. But that was a dangerous thought. She'd learned not to get too attached to temporary kindness. People had their own problems, their own struggles. She would thank the Hartwells for their generosity and be on her way. Martha was folding the blankets when Thomas appeared in the barn doorway, carrying a steaming cup of coffee and a plate of eggs and bacon. Good morning, he said with a smile. Ma thought you might be hungry. Martha stared at the plate in amazement. This is too much. I can't accept. You can and you will, Thomas said firmly, setting the food on a nearby crate. Besides, Ma made extra. She always cooks too much when she's nervous. Nervous? Thomas grinned. She's been up since 4 o'clock, cleaning things that were already clean. I think she's worried about what the neighbors might think if they see you here. Martha's heart sank. I should go. I don't want to cause problems for your family. The only problem would be if we let you leave without a proper breakfast. Thomas sat down on a bale of hay. Besides, I was hoping you might help me with something today. What kind of help? One of our cows is about to calve and she's having trouble. Ma's back is too sore to help, and I could use an extra pair of hands. You said you had experience with farm animals, Martha nodded. I've helped with difficult births before, but Thomas, your mother made it clear that I need to move on today. Let me worry about Ma. Will you help? Martha looked into his earnest face and found herself nodding. Of course. They spent the morning in the pasture with Bessie, a gentle Holstein, who was indeed having difficulty with her labor. Martha's experience proved invaluable as she guided Thomas through the process, a calm presence helping to keep both the cow and the young farmer steady when the calf finally arrived, a healthy heifer with distinctive white markings. Thomas let out a whoop of joy that could be heard across the farm. She's perfect, he exclaimed, watching as the mother began cleaning her newborn. Martha, I couldn't have done this without you. Martha felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun. It had been so long since she'd felt useful, needed. She's beautiful. What will you name her? Hope, Thomas said without hesitation. We'll call her Hope. Eleanor appeared at the pasture fence, drawn by her son's excited shouts. When she saw the healthy calf and the exhausted but triumphant expressions on Thomas and Martha's faces, something shifted in her chest. Everything went well, she asked. Better than well, Thomas replied. Martha knew exactly what to do. Bessie and the calf are both healthy. Eleanor studied Martha, noting the gentle way she spoke to the animals, the competent way she moved around the farm. This wasn't just a desperate woman looking for charity. This was someone who understood farm life. who could genuinely contribute. I suppose you'll be wanting to get on the road, Eleanor said. Though her tone lacked conviction, Martha nodded, though she felt a pang of regret. Yes, I should. Thank you again for everything. Actually, Ma, Thomas interjected, I was thinking, with the harvest coming in and your back bothering you, maybe Martha could stay a few more days. Just to help with the heavy work. Eleanor and Martha both stared at him. Eleanor's expression was unreadable, while Martha looked stunned. Thomas, we discussed this, Eleanor said carefully. I know, but look at what she accomplished this morning. And you've been saying you need help with the canning and preserving. Martha has experience with all of that. Martha found her voice. I couldn't impose any longer. You've already done so much, it wouldn't be charity, Thomas said quickly. We'd pay you, not much but enough for food and a small wage. And you could sleep in the spare room instead of the barn. Eleanor looked between her son and Martha, seeing the hope in both their faces. She thought about her aching back, the overwhelming amount of work that lay ahead with the harvest, and the loneliness that had settled over the farm since her husband's death. 1 week, she said finally. We'll try it for 1 week. Martha's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I promise you won't regret this. As they walked back to the house together, Eleanor found herself asking, do you know anything about preserving peaches? We have 3 trees that are about to come ripe, and I'm not sure I can handle all that work alone. My grandmother taught me to make the best peach preserves in Missouri. Martha replied with a smile. I'd be happy to help. For the first time since her husband's death, Eleanor felt a spark of excitement about the harvest season. Maybe having help wouldn't be such a bad thing after all. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table sharing a meal of fried chicken and fresh vegetables from the garden, Martha felt something she'd almost forgotten, the warmth of belonging to a family, even temporarily. Thomas regaled them with stories of the new calf's antics, while Eleanor found herself laughing at Martha's tales of her grandmother's cooking disasters. For a few hours, the weight of their individual struggles seemed to lift, replaced by the simple pleasure of good food and better company. Tomorrow we'll start on the peach preserves, Eleanor announced as they cleared the dishes. And Martha, if you're going to be staying, you'll need some proper work clothes. I have some things that might fit you. As Martha helped with the dishes, she caught Thomas's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." He winked in response, and she felt her heart flutter in a way it hadn't since her husband's death. Maybe, just maybe, this week would turn into something more. The week passed like a dream Martha was afraid to wake from. Each morning brought new tasks and small victories. Successful batches of peach preserves that Eleanor declared, better than my mother's. A vegetable garden that flourished under Martha's careful attention, and a growing sense of belonging that both thrilled and terrified her. Thomas had been right about his mother needing help. Eleanor's back problems were more serious than she'd admitted, and Martha's presence allowed her to rest while still maintaining the farm's productivity. More importantly, the two women had discovered a natural rhythm of working together, their different strengths complementing each other perfectly. On the 6th day, as they worked side by side, canning the last of the peaches, Eleanor broke the comfortable silence between them. "Martha, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever think about remarrying? You're still young, and you're the kind of woman any man would be lucky to have." Martha's hands stilled on the jar she was sealing. "I loved my husband very much. The thought of replacing him feels wrong somehow." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "I felt the same way after Thomas's father died. But I've come to realize that loving someone new doesn't diminish what we had before. It just means our hearts are big enough for more than one great love." Martha glanced at Eleanor, wondering if there was a deeper meaning to her words. "Have you thought about remarrying?" "At my age? Hardly," Eleanor chuckled. "But you're different. You have your whole life ahead of you." That evening, as Martha sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, Thomas joined her with 2 glasses of lemonade. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "I was just thinking about how peaceful it is here. How different my life could have been if—" She trailed off, not wanting to voice the impossible dream that had been growing in her heart. If what? Martha turned to look at him. This kind young man who had shown her more compassion in a week than she'd received in 2 years of wandering. If I'd met someone like you before I became a burden to society. Thomas set down his glass and turned to face her fully. Martha, you are not a burden. You never were. You're one of the strongest, most capable women I've ever met. Any community would be lucky to have you. You don't understand, Martha said, her voice thick with emotion. I've been called a burden so many times that I started to believe it. People see a woman alone and assume she's looking for charity, for someone to take care of her. But I don't want charity, Thomas. I want to contribute. I want to matter. You do matter, Thomas said softly. You matter to Ma. I can see it in the way she lights up when you laugh. You matter to the animals. They're calmer when you're around. And you matter to me. Martha's breath caught. Thomas, I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving your husband, and I respect that. But I need you to know that what I feel for you isn't pity or charity. It's something I've never felt before. Before Martha could respond, Eleanor appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but we have visitors. 3 riders were approaching the farm, their horses kicking up dust in the fading light. Thomas stood, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle he kept by the door. It's all right, Eleanor said. It's just the Millers from the next farm over. The Millers, an older couple and their adult son, dismounted near the porch. Martha recognized the look in their eyes immediately, suspicion and disapproval. Evening, Eleanor, Thomas, Mr. Miller said, tipping his hat. His gaze lingered on Martha with obvious distaste. We heard you've taken in a guest. Martha's helping with the harvest, Eleanor replied coolly. Is there something you needed? Mrs. Miller stepped forward, her expression stern. Eleanor, we're concerned about you. Taking in strangers, especially women of questionable character. It's not safe. Martha felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger. She started to stand, ready to defend herself. But Thomas's hand on her shoulder kept her seated. Mrs. Miller, Thomas said, his voice dangerously quiet. I'd be careful about making assumptions about people you don't know. We know enough, the miller's son interjected. A woman alone, wandering from town to town, looking for handouts. What kind of decent woman lives like that? The kind who's had her world torn apart by tragedy and is trying to rebuild her life with dignity, Thomas replied, standing to his full height. The kind who works harder than any 3 people I know and asks for nothing but a chance to prove herself. Mr. Miller's expression softened slightly. Thomas, we're not trying to cause trouble. We're just looking out for your family. My father would have welcomed Martha with open arms, Thomas interrupted. He taught me that we judge people by their character, not their circumstances. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. I appreciate your concern, but Martha has been nothing but helpful and respectful. She's earned her place here. The Millers exchanged glances, clearly not getting the response they'd expected. After a few more awkward moments, they remounted their horses. Just be careful, Eleanor, Mrs. Miller called as they rode away. People will talk. As the sound of hoofbeats faded, Martha stood slowly. I should pack my things. Absolutely not, Eleanor said firmly, but they're right about one thing. People will talk. I don't want to damage your reputation in the community. Thomas moved to stand in front of her. Martha, look at me. Do you want to leave? Martha met his eyes, seeing the hope and determination there. No, she whispered. I don't want to leave. Then don't. We'll face whatever comes together. Eleanor nodded in agreement. Besides, I've decided something. That week trial period? Consider it extended indefinitely. If you're willing to stay, we'd like you to make this your permanent home. Martha's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything, Thomas said, taking her hands in his. Martha, I know it's soon, and I know you need time to heal. But I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd be honored to call you my wife. Martha looked between Thomas and Eleanor, seeing acceptance and love in both their faces. For the first time since her husband's death, she could envision a future filled with hope instead of mere survival. I'd like that, she said softly. I'd like that very much. As the three of them stood together on the porch, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky, Martha realized that sometimes the greatest journeys begin not with a destination in mind, but with a single act of kindness from a stranger who sees your worth when the rest of the world sees only your struggles. The farm that had offered her one night's shelter had become her home. The young man who had shared his food had become her future, and the woman who had reluctantly opened her door had become the mother she'd never had. Martha had been called a burden for being hungry, but she'd found a family who saw her as a blessing. In the end, that made all the difference. 6 months later, the Hartwell farm buzzed with activity as neighbors gathered for Martha and Thomas's wedding. Even the Millers attended, having long since recognized Martha's value to the community. Eleanor beamed with pride as she watched her son dance with his new bride, while little Hope, the calf born on Martha's first day, grazed peacefully in the pasture. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with passion, but with compassion. And sometimes home isn't a place you're born into, but a place that chooses to keep you. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of human kindness, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales from the American frontier. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that they matter, and let us know in the comments what act of unexpected kindness changed your life. Until next time, keep believing in the goodness of people and the power of hope.